intelligent people around me? Absolutely not.
I think censorship in the media is a really tough issue.
Growing up, social media didn't really play a huge part in my life. I would say it plays more of a part right now. And I would say it's a mixture of both positive and negative. And I think it's because of how I choose to intake all of my social media. So I know that most people would have body positivity issues and things like that, but I choose not to follow people I know will make me feel that way. So more so my social media is just used for my interest purely and not to look at other people. I would say YouTube is probably the one that gets me the most, is because I like looking at things like DIYs and I see these pretty girls who don't look like me and I want to look like them. So I would say in that way that's the negative. But when it comes to like Instagram, I don't even use Twitter, but when it comes to those kinds, I try to keep it purely interest focused and not something that will tear me down.
Media wasn't a big influence in my life growing up. I had great family members, my mom, my dad, my sister, people I looked up to gain knowledge, and they helped influence things in my life and made me the person I am today.
I want to challenge you to a fight. I'm going to give you the time, I'm going to give you the place, and there's no backing out now.
So growing up, I was affected by the media in a lot of ways, mostly positive, I'd say. I get a lot of my culture from the music that I like. And then sometimes I would have to give myself limits and just bring back how much I was playing video games, how much I was getting on my phone. But
I feel like growing up I was affected by the media a lot because it's so relevant now. And I think it's definitely a mix of both, but the media itself tends to focus on the negative. So it definitely shows you all the bad things happening in the world and like violence and, you know, just everything like that. So I think you definitely are kind of grown up watching the news in the morning or like, you know, just watching anything, and all the latest events that it shows is usually negative. So I think that it definitely negatively impacts you and only like kind of trains you to think that the world is like all bad.
The average child sees 12,000 violent acts on television annually, including many depictions of murder and rape. More than 1,000 studies confirm that exposure to heavy doses of television violence increases aggressive behavior, particularly in boys.
I don't think that kids should be exposed to like the bad things happening in the world, like crimes and like struggles in other countries. I think it just depends on how processed a child's mind is and how mature they are. But overall, I think you just need to introduce them to these concepts like small steps at a time and not just all at once.
I feel like every situation is circumstantial, whether a kid should or should not be exposed to violence in TV, music video, and games. Growing up, I was exposed to it, but it never really changed me or made me want to like go kill somebody as it would stereotypically be seen. So I think children should be exposed to violence because like that's not it's a normal thing in our world. Like we have wars and things like that. But I also feel like they shouldn't, I guess, purposely be exposed to violence to an extent. Like it just depends on how you define children. Like someone who's like 5 doesn't really need to purposely watch you play Call of Duty, I guess. But someone who's 10, things like that shouldn't really be filtered from their growing up experience. I don't think parents should completely control their kids' censorship. And I also don't think society should, because society depends, like, usually the stereotypes, and parents do what they think is best for their child. But I think some parents can be too restricting on what they give for, like, kids to see, because it's the real world. You're going to see some tough things out there, and by, like, babying your kid growing up, I don't think they're going to be able to easily adapt to what everyone has to do. So I feel like that's where society would come in and let them see, like, those real kind of things that parents would usually want to keep away from their children.
I feel that controlling censorship with kids. I think it should be an equal part on the parents and the kids.
So my opinion on the violence in video games and TV shows goes that you should limit how much they see your children, but I don't think that a child that grows up playing a violent video game will grow up to be violent because of that video game. I think that comes from bad parenting in other ways. That's not just straight influence from what they've seen. But there is definitely a line that you need to draw about how violent. Obviously, things like murders and assassinations should not be shown to a kid under the age of, I'd say, 12. But I think that the argument that people say that video games are causing children in our generation to be more violent is totally false. So
I think that it's important and also like bad at the same time. I think violence in video games can be definitely excessive, and it can train, especially starting at a young age. If you're playing those violent video games, it can kind of train you to think that violence is okay and accepted and that there aren't really consequences, you know? But I think that violence on like news channels can be important to like learn the dangers of the world as well. I don't really think that the media is going to control censorship. I think that it's kind of too grown at this point. So I think that it's definitely up to the parents a little bit to kind of control what your child is watching and seeing.
Children with long-term exposure are at an increased risk for behavioral, psychological, and physical problems, academic failure, alcohol and substance use, delinquent acts, and adult criminality. When these children repeat the violence they have experienced, they perpetuate a cycle of violence that can continue throughout future generations.
I would say I'm a decent influence on those around me. I mean, academically wise, I get decent grades, you know. I'm a normal student. I don't do anything out of the norm. But I would say if I had to pick, like, you know, you have your mom friend, you have your other friends and whatnot. I'm definitely not the mom friend of the group, if I could say so. I am the more rambunctious, like, go do it, like, bet kind of friend. So, if it's around other people like my friends, I'm a semi-good influence. But if it's, like, complete strangers, yeah. I'm not going to act up out of the norm around, like, you know, the 70-year-old man in my Target waiting line, so.
I do feel that I'm a good influence on the people around me. I always try to take their thoughts and feelings in consideration before I form my own opinion, but I also try to lead by example.
I'd say that I am a great influence to those around me, day in, day out. Even if I'm having a bad day, I always try to be a good influence.
And in other phases. Right now, both of my kids have their license and they drive and have jobs and leave the house a lot, and fewer things happen under my roof with their friends. But there have been periods of time when they were a little more dependent on parents for driving that our house tended to be the hub for a lot of social activities, which also meant that I was driving kids who weren't always my kids, were my kids' peer group. And I feel like I was a place where people felt comfortable talking to me, and I know in a couple of specific cases that, you know, when someone had an issue, a friend of one of my kids had an issue, that they felt comfortable coming to me, which made me feel like they saw me as a person they could trust and who would have advice that they could depend on.
But I'm doing it for the kid that really lives a thug life and feels like it's hopeless. So when I say hopeless, and when I say when I say it like that, it's like I reach him. You understand? And even if when I reach him, it makes it look glorious to the guy that doesn't live that life. I mean, I can't help it. It's a fad, you know. He'll drop the thug life soon enough. But for the person that I was trying to reach, he'll pick it up, and I'll be able to talk to him again. I'm being...
Through the National Healthy People 2020 initiative, the federal government has set a goal to reduce children's exposure to violence from 60.6% in 2008 to 54.5% in 2020.
When it comes to younger people, I probably don't think about how any of my actions influence others, but I don't think it's because I don't care about the younger children in our society. I think it's because I don't really hang around kids all like that. If I'm in like an elementary school and things like that, then I definitely am aware of what I'm doing and how it might influence a child, but most of the day I'm not in an elementary school. I'm usually at home or something, or I'm out with friends, and my friends aren't children, so...
I always think about my response and how that's going to affect kids before saying my thoughts and feelings on any subject.
So anytime that there are younger people around me, I will always think about my actions before acting upon them, or even what I say, because I know when I was a child, I looked up towards certain people and didn't really copy them, but I remembered a thing that happened when I was young, and I replicated that when I became older, good or bad, and I had to learn the bad things from bad. So obviously I don't want to pass that on to other people. And then the second reason that I always make sure I'm a good influence to younger kids is because you never know whose parents are doing their jobs in the house. So they might not have a role model in their house like some of us are lucky enough to have. So you might need to be that role model, even if you only see that kid for 30 seconds ever in their life. That could make the difference. So I think it's always important to think about what you do in front of anybody, and especially in front of the younger kids. So yeah.
I think that I definitely do think about that, just because it's important. You know, before I post anything, I think about who follows my social medias if they see it. Not that I do anything like crazy, but like if I like throw a cuss word in somewhere, I think about it. But like,
Heavy metal music was not a bad influence for Colette. More than not, it was just giving her different experiences in the world through music.
However, it's been a positive influence from my perspective on your development, and has kind of opened up a world of expression, and I think you have blossomed in terms of feeling free to explore different ideas and